Hello YouTube, Dave here again. So last night I went through and actually made a character using the brand new Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest rules. Now it took me quite a while to actually get the character made, so I honestly don't feel comfortable enough with it as of yet to actually do it on camera, but I still want to actually do a video showing the step-by-step process of creating a character. But I thought just for now I would show the character that I ended up creating and sort of relate some of my thoughts on the character creation process and the way that some of the rules are handled so far. So I initially wanted to just make my standard human fighter, but honestly I wasn't really I thought that would be more interesting to do one of the other races. So you'll also have to forgive the colors on my character sheet here. I still haven't had an opportunity to pick up a brand new ink cartridge yet, so it didn't print off the standard colors that you would normally see, but it still works well enough as far as I'm concerned. So the character that I actually ended up making was, I just gave him the name Gareth, and he is a dwarf fighter with the warrior background, which is pretty standard stuff. I made him lawful good. I didn't bother choosing a deity for him, but just kind of go through the process here. So this is the actual sheet itself. Now there's 3 sheets that this character sheet is made up of, although the last one is purely spells, so I don't have to worry about that one as of yet. So we'll look at the character in a little bit more detail here in a moment, but I thought I would actually just kind of go through and show how I had everything set up. So we'll just start off here. Just tilt the camera up a little bit. We'll zoom in some. Alright, and once again, just forgive my handwriting. I'm a lefty, and I think that, basically has an effect on it. But I went with the default method, where all of your stats start with a base of 10. I chose a dwarf, so what I have here is the base stat, Ancestry, and Ancestry has boosts and flaws. Your background can generate a bonus to your stats as well, or a boost, I guess is the term that they use. And then the character started with, first level characters start with 4 what are called free boosts. And the free boosts are essentially, you can put them wherever you want. You don't have to limit them to a particular spot. So your character, first level character starts with 4 boosts that they can use to distribute amongst their stats. The dwarf race had one that was granted by the race, and the background granted one as well. So I had a total of 6 boosts, which I'll kind of show the math here in a moment. So we started with our base 10, and the way it works is that similar to Starfinder, your first level character cannot have a stat above 18. So that was something that you have to keep in mind. That's sort of a hard cap. There is a method where you can roll 4d6 and take the 3 highest. But if you do that, and you had like a 17 for example, and you got a boost to that ability score, you would only get +1 to it. So you can only go up to the 18. Now I guess there is a method where you can alternatively put it into another stat. It effectively becomes free. But I'm not as big a fan of that as just having, I think this method actually, with the 10s and the boosts and all that stuff, I think it works perfectly fine as it is. So we started with the base 10 for everything, and then we had our Ancestry. So as a dwarf, my Ancestry boost was 1 free, which I factored in later, but there was a boost to Constitution, as well as a boost to Wisdom. Now, another thing about boosts is that when you get them, your boosts from basically the lowest number that you could possibly get all the way up to 18 is a boost that gives you 2 to that ability. So start with 10, you have a boost, gives you +2. Once you reach 18, however, each boost only applies a single point to that attribute. So it's something that I think is actually kind of an interesting mechanic, and I actually kind of like that quite a bit. I think that works pretty well, actually. So it sort of keeps them from getting too far out of hand. The flaw, of course, that I had was to Charisma. I can't remember if I mentioned that yet or not, so I had -2 to Charisma. My background as a soldier, or as a warrior, gave me a boost to, I think it was either Strength or Con. Now, I could have put it into Constitution and kind of double down on that, but I'm going to be a melee fighter, so I wanted to have a decent Strength, so I put the +2 there. I then had my free boosts, which I had 6 of total. So 3 of them went into my strength. So with the 10 for the base, the 12 or the boost for my background, and the other 3 boosts on top of that got me up to the 18 for my strength. Dexterity I left alone, so that is at 10. Constitution I put 2 boosts in, so went up to 16. Wisdom or intelligence I left alone. Wisdom I had 1 for my race, and I put another one in there for the one of the free boosts, bring that up to a 14, and I left the charisma at an 8. As a dwarf, my hit points are determined, so in Pathfinder 2.0, or during the playtest, and similar to how they do it in Starfinder, your race and class dictate your hit points. Now, Pathfinder only has hit points. They don't have a mechanic similar to Starfinder where they had hit points and then your stamina points, where your stamina points, you regain them quite a bit easier than you did with your hit points, and they were kind of like a pool that you went through first, although there may be some things that bypass stamina and go straight to hit points, for example. Pathfinder doesn't have that. It's just straight hit points. But my Dwarven race gave me 10 hit points, and my class gave me 10 hit points, and my Constitution modifier of +3, because the modifiers for your stats work very similar to how they are in from 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons forward. So that gave me 23 hit points for my first level character. My speed for my race is 20 feet, and that basically ends up staying pretty much the same. Now, what's interesting about what I discovered for the races in the 2nd edition version of Pathfinder is they get very few abilities that they start off with. So unlike, more other role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons or even Pathfinder 1st edition, where your race just had this whole list of racial traits, what you have as a dwarf was I had dark vision, and I think that was it. Yeah, I think that was there was dark vision, and there was dark vision, and there was the ability called. See if I've got it here somewhere. It was one that basically made it so that if my speed was reduced due to encumbrance, unburdened. So if my speed is reduced due to encumbrance, I negate 5 feet of that speed reduction. So, for example, if my armor would reduce my speed from 20 to 15. It would stay at 20. If my speed would be reduced from 20 down to 10 due to encumbrance, then basically I would have a speed of 15 instead. So I got those as my racial traits, but nothing else that the dwarves are kind of known for is something that you get by default. Instead, you have what are referred to as ancestry feats. So you choose those at like 1st, 3rd, 5th, 1st, 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th level, you get ancestry feats. And what's kind of interesting about those is a lot of these ancestry feats are essentially the racial traits that you would have that other versions of fantasy role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or 1st edition would all have just front-loaded. In this one, you kind of have like an aspect of your race that you start with, and you develop more of their traits as you progress. And I actually kind of like that. I think that it's a cool idea, and it's a way of saying that, as you grow, as you progress and, grow or age or, what have you, you keep adding these abilities instead of just saying, well, hey, you're a first level character, here's all your racial traits right off the top. I think it's actually kind of an interesting concept. So the one that I took was Ancestral Hatred, which gives me, there's a list of things that you can choose from. I chose Giants and Orcs, and I get a +1 circumstance bonus to damage if I'm attacking one of them. Now, if one of those individuals, like a Giant or an Orc, were to hit me with a critical hit, then I can actually get a +4 bonus to damage against them in retaliation for up to a minute, which I thought was actually pretty cool. As a soldier, or as a warrior, I chose for the background, you get a background feat, which is part of the background itself. So the background feat that I was given was quick repair. So if I go to like repair armor, shield, weapon, or something along those lines, instead of it taking an hour, it takes 10 minutes. So that was the one that I got for that. And for my class, I decided to take the power attack feat. So I can deal extra weapon damage, or I can deal an extra 1 die of weapon damage on a melee attack. However, it does count as making 2 attacks for like a multiple attack penalty, which I will talk a little bit about here, but I'm not 100% on that mechanic yet, so I don't want to, essentially I don't want to say definitively how it works and be wrong. You mean, you know, errors get made and stuff like that happens. For skills, I got Warfare Lore as an automatic skill that I'm considered to be trained in, and I had 3 other ones that I took. I chose Athletic, Survival, and I forgot to write it in, but the other one was Crafting. No, sorry, it wasn't Crafting. Athletics, Survival, and oh, maybe I didn't take a third one. I may have forgot to. Oh no, sorry, I took Medicine. So I took Medicine as the third skill that I'm considered to be trained in. Alright, so let's have a look at the actual sheet itself. And most stuff that I have to worry about here is on this front sheet, so I'm just going to move some stuff around, aim the camera down, and just sort of take a little bit of a closer look at it here, because when I first looked at this sheet, it was very sort of daunting, and I don't want to say confusing, but there were definitely some issues with it that I wasn't quite sure what things meant, but I've kind of learned that now, so I kind of figured that out. So, just got the basic character information here, so I got my speed, my hit points, and what's interesting is that each class, instead of Perception being a skill that you can choose from, so like here's the list of skills for example, let's just zoom out just a little bit here. Perception is actually something that is separated from the rest of those skills, and your class determines your level of training in Perception. So everything from weapons to armor, shields, skills, and I want to say saving throws as well. Yeah, saving throws are affected by that as well. You have different levels of training, and that's what these things here are on the sheet. So let's get it, see if it'll focus. Alright, so as you can see here, there is T, E, M, and L. And those are your sort of your levels of training. So the way that these things work is if you're not considered to be trained in something, like for example, you know, Arcana as a skill here, like I said, I'm not trained in it. There's a lot of skills that I'm not obviously not trained in. If you're untrained, then your proficiency bonus that you add to your checks is your level subtract 2. So at first level, that would equal a -1 penalty. At second level, it increases, it would be just a straight roll, basically, with my stat modifier, so the proficiency bonus would be 0. At third level, it would finally be like a +1 and so on and so forth. If you're trained in a skill or an ability, your proficiency bonus, which, again, if we get it to focus, here it is zoomed in, so it can be a little bit more difficult to get it to focus. So if you are trained in something, like for example I'm trained in athletics, your proficiency bonus equals your level. So in this case, my proficiency bonus on athletics checks was +1, in addition to my strength score and modified for the armor check penalty for the type of armor that I'm wearing. Now, at first level, you're never going to go beyond expert. So the levels of training are untrained, trained, expert, master, and legendary. So T for trained, E for expert, M for master, and L for legendary. Something that I should also mention is that your classes have what are referred to as signature skills. So signature skills are things that your class is sort of known for, or they're strongly associated with that particular class. With your skills and your signature skills, they're the only ones that you can go beyond being trained to the expert level in. So as your character progresses, you gain a skill increase that you can use. You can either put it into an existing skill to get it from trained to expert, or you can go from untrained to trained. With your signature skill, I think it starts at 11th level. You can actually go to master or legendary level of training. Master or expert level of training, which is something that you can obtain with some things at first level for your character. For example, my fighter has it in simple and martial weapons, as well as the saving throws of fortitude and reflex, and finally expert level of training in perception for the fighter. The proficiency bonus for that is your level +1. So in this case, I get a bonus of +2 for anything that I have an expert level of training in. If I had the master level of training, it's your level +2. And if I had legendary level of training, it's your level +3 as far as a bonus goes. So, zoom out just a little bit here again. So, the fighter class, and I just sort of went over that, has expert level training in simple and martial weapons, but you are considered to be at least trained in all exotic or unconventional weapons. Alright, sorry about that. So yeah, so we were looking at the training levels. So I was considered to be an expertly trained in simple martial weapons, but pretty much any weapon that the character can come across, they are at least considered to be trained in. So you don't suffer that penalty to attack rolls. For armor, you get basic training in light, medium, heavy, and shields. And then, like I said, I had perception was put up to the expert level. And what's interesting is that perception is what is typically used for initiative in this system. So instead of initiative being a separate thing like it has been for Dungeons and Dragons from, well, basically from the beginning of time, it's, from what I read, it's based on your perception. So I just put a little note there, used for initiative, and I've got my saving throws here, so fortitude, reflex, and will, so it still uses that system, but I've considered to be an expert in fortitude and reflex and trained in will, so which is good. So I get total bonuses of +5 for my fortitude, 3 for con, 2 for proficiency, +2 for reflex, which is just a straight proficiency bonus, and I get +3 for my will. For equipment, we have to move on to the second sheet here. So equipment and encumbrance in this system uses the same system or mechanics that the Starfinder role-playing game uses. And I don't mind that. It's actually a pretty decent system, but instead of worrying about the specific weight of items, you worry about what's considered to be their bulk. So each item has a bulk rating. It's either a numerical number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., or it could be considered L, which is light. And if you have a bulk item that has the bulk indicator of L, what that means is that it's so light that 1 or 2 of those items aren't really going to make a difference. It's not until you get up to specifically 10 of them that they would count towards, that those 10 items would count towards one bulk. So you can have 3 items with an L on it. It won't affect your carrying or your encumbrance. You could have 9 of them and it still wouldn't count. When you get to 10, it's considered one bulk, but if you had 19, for example, it's still technically just one bulk, and it's not until you reach 20 of those items that you would get up to 2. Your carrying capacity is, for bulk as far as you go, to be unencumbered. It is your strength. What do we got here? I think, yeah, strength +5 is, your number to meet in terms of bulk before you're considered to be encumbered. Your maximum amount of bulk that you can carry is your strength modifier +10. So, for example, we've got encumbered, ENC here, which is 5 plus strength. So right now I can carry up to 9 bulk before I'm considered to be encumbered, or once I reach 9 bulk I'm considered encumbered, and I can carry a maximum of up to 14. So the items that I have here, I have just scale mail armor, which has a bulk of 2, heavy steel shield, which has a bulk of 1, a battle axe, which has a bulk of 1, a crossbow, which has a bulk of 1, and then I've got a bunch of essentially light items, or a few things that aren't considered to have any sort of encumbrance whatsoever. So I have a thing of bolts, a pup tent, instead of a bedroll, 50 feet of hemp rope. I picked up 2 water skins, a grappling hook, a hatchet, a hammer, and 4 days worth of rations. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10 items there. That got me up to 1 additional bulk, so I had 2, an additional 1, so 3, 4, 5, and that got me up to 6 total. In addition to that, I also have backpack, common clothes, and I picked up 10 pythons. They don't count towards really anything at all. Interesting note about bulk and armor. So the bulk for the armor, scale mail armor that I have here, the numbers that they give you on the chart are assuming that you're actually wearing the armor, that you actually have the armor on your body with it fastened properly so that, you know, the weight is actually evenly distributed. If I was just carrying a suit of chainmail armor, then its bulk value would actually be 1 higher, so it would give me up to a bulk rating of 3. I'd still be less than encumbered, so I wouldn't have to worry about that. But that's basically it that I have so far. I mean, I'm only a first level character, but there's just a few more interesting things about this system that I think is kind of interesting. So as you can see here, for armor class, I have an AC of 14. The scale mail armor gives me a bonus of +4. Now there's no spot on there for shield. So you have item, proficiency, dexterity cap if you have to worry about it, or whatever your dexterity is. And I should also say, I think if you're not trained in armor but you're wearing it anyway, its dex cap I think applies to anything that you would use your dexterity for, like reflex saves and skill checks and stuff like that, I believe. So I'll have to get back to you on that one in particular. But what's interesting is that your shield doesn't add the armor class bonus by default. You actually have to use, when it's your turn in combat, you have to use one of your actions to what's called raise your shield. So in combat, the way that it works is you get, I think it's 3 actions that you can take. And I'll talk a little bit more about it probably in its own separate video. Like I want to do an actual combat demonstration, probably do the goblin test like I've done for the various editions of Dungeons & Dragons. But what's interesting is some of the actions, I kind of wish they were a bit more simplified in terms of their names. For example, you know, I would like just to have one simply say attack, or have like move, you know, as just the descriptions. Instead, you've got strike, which is your attack action, and to move, if you want to move up to your movement, it's called, I think it's called stride. So they chose some kind of unusual names for their actions, for your action economy, and it's not necessarily that the names themselves bother me, but I'd like to see them organized by like attack actions, movement actions, and then maybe miscellaneous with the various types of like the different movement ones that you can take. Like you could leap, you could stride, you know, just have all those ones as sort of subcategories. But it took me a little while reading through them or trying to find, just kind of scan through the list to actually find the option to move, and it was just, the organization was a little bit weird for that, and something that's definitely going to take a little bit of getting used to. And you can actually make multiple attacks. So when you talk about power attack counting as 2 attack rolls, I think what happens is if you're making multiple swings, you get like a penalty. So I can take 1 swing and just get my normal attack roll, modifiers and everything, and not have to worry about it. If I were to switch, which I've got up here as a total of +6, but if I were to take 2 swings, I believe you get, well, it's a -5 penalty, and I think that -5 penalty applies to both swings, if I recall correctly. It may only apply to the second one. I'm going to have to read that a little bit more thoroughly. I wasn't really going through the combat rules, I was just trying to make a character. But I think it applies to both, because I know in Starfinder, you can take an action to do what's called like a full-on attack, I think it is, where you attack twice, but both of your attacks suffer. I think it was like a -4 penalty in that one. But you can also do 3 attacks, and it's a -10. So again, I think it applies to every attack roll that you make, meaning it's something that you really don't want to do at lower levels. Like if I were to take 2 attacks right now, then I would only get a +1 bonus to my attack rolls. So even though like power attack, if I were to use it, would let me roll an extra, like I'd be rolling 2d8, which isn't bad, but I'd only have a +1 bonus. So right now at first level, it's something that I probably wouldn't use too often, but you never know, you may need it sort of in a clutch moment kind of idea. You've also got your items, so we went through, we got the armor stuff done. Raise a shield is an action, so essentially if I had to move in a round, for example, what I would probably end up doing is using the stride action to move, using the strike action to make an attack roll, and then use the raise a shield action to have my shield up. The one thing about that is that you're going to have to kind of remember that now, because you have to actively raise your shield instead of just always having it available to you. You have to actively make sure that you're putting that shield back up, otherwise it's effectively useless, although its armor check penalty applies as long as you've got it strapped to your arm, kind of idea. For the weapons that I have here, I have the battle axe, I have a hatchet, and I've got a crossbow. And what I kind of like about this character sheet here is that it actually has the spot for what kind of damage it is. So you got bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, so you just kind of shade that in, and I forgot to shade that in for my hatchet, so there we go. And your items, your weapons actually have their own abilities that they can add to, that you can use as well. So for example, my battle axe has the sweep ability, and I only read it at a very quick glance yesterday because, again, I'm not really getting into the combat system yet, but I think what it does is actually reduces the penalty for multiple attacks, I think by like -1 or something like that, or -1 or -2. I can't remember what it is, but it actually, as far as I know, it actually reduces the penalty for making multiple attacks. So having the battle axe with the sweep ability and power attack might be a little bit more worthwhile. The hatchet I took mainly as a thrown weapon, but it has the agile ability as well, which I think means you can use your dexterity modifier with it. It has sweep as well, and I can throw it up to 10 feet. And I also have a crossbow, which I actually forgot to, whoops, I forgot to fill the numbers in for that. But I'll worry about that later. Although I guess I can fill in some of it here. So why don't I just look that up real quick, like under equipment. Whoops, a little too far. Into feats, equipment. There we go. So we've got the crossbow. So crossbow is 1d8 piercing. It's got a range of 120 feet. Reload as an action, as the heavy crossbow takes 2 actions to reload, and its ability I think is just, yeah, it doesn't have any other fancy weapon traits or anything like that. So d8 is the damage, so let's aim back down here. Alright, so I've got I'm considered to be, it's a simple weapon, simple range weapon, so I'm considered to be up to expert level training, and I'm assuming you got to shade these circles in, or you could check mark them, or you could do something, but I just think that shading them in is a little bit easier, and shading in, you know, up to all the ones up to your highest level of training, so you don't get kind of confused. So I've got up to expert training because it's a simple weapon. My dexterity modifier is 0, but my proficiency, because it's expert training, is my level +1. Which is, right now, would be a proficiency bonus of +2. So let's put +2. I don't have an item bonus. It's not, you know, magical or anything like that. And the range, I think the range said was 120 feet. And it is 1d8. And I'm not adding anything to that, like I don't add dexterity or anything. Just the straight dice number. And my total attack bonus is going to be +2. So there you go. Because my hatchet is a thrown weapon, I can use my strength to throw it. So it's, I think I picked up 2 of those, if I recall. Anyway, so that's probably the range one that I would use in a pinch more often if possible. But there you go. So like I said, so far it's an interesting system, and I like a lot about it. Just from making this character, there's a lot that I kind of like about this system, and that I like more than the original Pathfinder. So for me, I'm okay with a lot of these changes, even though it'd be nice to see some of the things be organized a little bit differently, particularly when it comes to your action types, to have them be a little bit more kind of organized, I guess, because I think they had them in alphabetical order, and I would rather have them by like attack, movement, and miscellaneous if there's other types of actions that you want to take. For example, like your attack actions would be like to strike or to throw or whatever. You could even put the raised shield into that. The biggest thing I think for me is knowing that you have to be aware that you need to use the raise a shield action, because my armor class goes from 14 to 16 with the shield up, and shields also affect your touch AC fully. Which is something that I do like about them. Now, interesting thing I guess I didn't really mention here is that you have your armor class and you have your touch armor class. And what's interesting is that your armor actually slightly plays into your touch armor class now. So, for example, my scale armor gives me a +3 bonus to armor class, and it gives me a +1 bonus to my touch AC. So it actually can affect it a little bit. It basically means that if someone goes to do a touch attack, that the armor might actually slightly deflect the attack away. So I think that's actually kind of cool. I think it's similar to kinetic and energy armor classes from Starfinder. So, and like I said, there's a lot of stuff from Starfinder that I kind of see in here, like with the backgrounds affecting your ability scores, with your race and class affecting your hit points, getting just set values for hit points at every level. Is very similar to what they did in Starfinder. The proficiency levels are wholly unique to this system. They're not something that Starfinder had. And they're interesting. I actually kind of like them a fair bit, but having penalties at first level for any untrained skill kind of sucks. For example, because I didn't put a I didn't put a boost into my charisma, and it has a -1 penalty, to try to use diplomacy or deception or even intimidation, I'm at a -2 penalty. So, yeah, but I understand where they're coming from, where being trained in something gives you a proficiency bonus equal to your level. So obviously they had to do something if you were untrained, and I kind of get that. And as far as I know, there are certain parts of skills that you can only use if you're trained in them, which is fine. I like the idea of the signature skills that you have for your class. Now, you don't have to take them, which is, again, fine. You can take them if you want. Like, I probably don't plan on taking crafting beyond probably just being normally trained in it, but it is an option. And other than that, I don't mind the bulk system, although again you have to sort of be aware of how many items you have that are considered light or that have the L designation, so that when you're calculating that, you have to know that you need 10 of them to get to that one bulk. But it's still something that works fine enough. And anyway, so that's my first level character so far, and like I said, I'm not 100% comfortable with the character creation system yet, so I probably take a few more days to look over, probably over the weekend, for example, maybe make one more practice character, and then I'll actually do one on camera from the very beginning. So anyway, that is my character creation, or what I've learned from creating a character so far for the 2nd edition Pathfinder playtest. So if you've made any characters yourself, let me know in the comments below what your experiences were. If I messed anything up, let me know that as well, because I definitely don't want to make mistakes in this. But it's a brand new system that I made this character the same day that I actually picked the stuff up. So anyway, enjoyed making it though, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with the system itself. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Take care.